You know this man, golden hair, polished armor, trading clever little jokes with his brother on a glowing screen. Forget him. The Thor the Vikings actually knelt to was something else entirely. A giant of a man with a beard like fire and a temper like thunder and an appetite that could empty a farmhouse in a single sitting. And his story, the real one, it ends 1,000 years before Marvel, with the god of thunder face down in the mud. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll understand why a Viking farmer loved this Thor more than Odin himself. Start with his face. Not blonde, red. The old poems give him a beard of burning red and eyes that flash storm gray when his anger rises. He's huge, broad as a barn door, all muscle and hunger. When he laughs, the roof beams shake. When he scowls, the sky goes dark, and he was no prince. Odin kept the kings and the poets. Thor belonged to everyone else. The farmer, the fisherman, the blacksmith, the ordinary people. He was the most loved god in the whole Viking world. In fact, you still say his name every single week, and you've probably never noticed. Thursday, Thor's Day. Now, so, his chariot. It wasn't pulled by horses, it was pulled by 2 goats. And this is where the real story leaves the movies far, far behind. When Thor gets hungry on the road, he kills both goats, skins them, roasts them over the fire, and eats his fill. Then he gives his hosts one rule, and only one: do not break the bones. Lay every bone back on the hide. And in the morning, he lifts his hammer over the skins. And the goats stand back up, alive, whole, bleeding, ready to pull the chariot again. But one night, a farm boy gets greedy. He splits a leg bone open for the marrow inside. And the next morning, one of the goats limps. Thor's eyes go gray, his knuckles whiten on the handle, and the terrified family gives up their own children as servants, just to keep their lives. And that hammer? Mjolnir. The movies turned it into a test. Only the worthy can lift it. The truth is so much funnier. It was forged by 2 dwarf brothers deep underground on a bet that Loki set up and then tried to wreck. While the dwarves work the bellows, Loki turns himself into a fly and bites one of them on the eyelid, hard enough to draw blood. The dwarf flinches. His hand slips, just for a heartbeat. And that is why the deadliest weapon in the 9 worlds came out of the forge with a stubby, too short handle. It was never about being worthy. It was about raw strength. The thing is so heavy that Thor needs iron gloves just to grip it and a belt of power just to lift it off the ground. But once it flies, it never misses, and it always comes home to his hand. Which brings us to Loki. And no, he was never Thor's brother. He wasn't a prince of anywhere. In the real myths, Loki is a giant living among the gods, Odin's sworn blood brother, and Thor's traveling companion, half friend, half walking disaster. And he is stranger than any film would ever dare to show you. Loki doesn't just change his shape, he changes his sex. He once turned himself into a mare, lured away a giant stallion, and came back months later as a mother, giving birth to the 8-legged horse that Odin himself would ride into battle. He's also the father of monsters. A great wolf, the great queen of the dead, and a serpent so vast that it grows to wrap all the way around the world. Remember that serpent. It's waiting at the end of this story. But first, the strangest tale the Vikings ever told about their strongest god. The one no superhero film will ever touch. One morning, Thor wakes up and the hammer is gone, stolen by a giant named Thrym, who will give it back on a single condition: the goddess Freya handed over as his bride. Freya refuses so hard that her necklace bursts right off her throat. So, the gods come up with another plan. They dress Thor as the bride. Picture it, the red-bearded mountain of a god, a veil over his face, a gown over his shoulders, walking willingly into the giant's hall. At the feast, the blushing bride eats a whole ox, 8 salmon, 3 barrels of mead. The giant marvels at his bride's appetite. He leans in, lifts the veil for a kiss, and meets 2 burning gray eyes staring straight back. Then the giants bring out the hammer to bless the marriage, and they lay it in the bride's lap. Thor's hand closes around the handle. What follows is not a wedding. It's a slaughter, and he laughs the whole way through it. The Vikings loved that story. Their god could be made a complete fool of and still win. But there was one enemy he could never laugh off: Loki's child, the world serpent, coiled around the floor of the ocean with its own tail locked in its jaws. One day, Thor goes fishing with a giant. He baits a line with the severed head of an ox and drops it into the deep. Something takes it. He hauls. The boat groans. The sea begins to boil, and up out of the black water rises the head of the serpent, venom dripping from its jaws, eye to eye with the god. Thor braces so hard that his feet punch straight through the bottom of the boat. He lifts the hammer, and the terrified giant cuts the line. The serpent sinks back into the dark, and they both know this isn't over. Because the Norse, unlike Hollywood, did not let their heroes live forever. At the end of the world, Ragnarok, the sky tears open and the serpent rises one last time. It floods the land. It spits poison across the heavens, and Thor meets it the only way he has ever known how. Head on, they fight while the gods fall all around them, and Thor wins. He shatters the skull of the beast that has haunted his entire life. So, then he takes 9 steps. And on the 9th, the serpent's venom, soaked deep into his blood, drops him into the mud. The strongest god in the 9 worlds dies, not beaten, poisoned, in the very moment of his victory. But the hammer doesn't die with him. 2 of his sons walk out of the ashes of the broken world, lift Mjolnir between them, and carry the thunder into whatever comes next. So, red hair, not gold. Goats, not horses. A hammer born from a botched bet. A best friend who was a mother to a horse and the father of the very thing that killed him. A god who wore a wedding dress. And a god who died 9 steps after the greatest victory of his life. The Avenger is fun, I get it. But the Vikings carved something deeper. A flawed, hungry, mortal god who guarded the common farmer, who could be tricked and laughed at, and who walked open-eyed toward an ending he already knew he could not survive. That is the Thor 1,000 years of people actually believed in. And that, far more than any movie, is a god worth remembering. These stories come down to us from the old Norse poems and from an Icelander named Snorri Sturluson, the Eddas, written down centuries after the Vikings first told them around the fire. The pictures you've watched are illustrations, not relics, but the god inside them, he's the real one.